She smiled like nothing was wrong, like our world wasn't about to split in half, like she hadn't just handed me the emotional equivalent of a ticking bomb with a pink ribbon tied around it. And I stood there, realizing that sometimes the worst betrayals were the softest faces. You think you know a person after sharing the same bed for years, after raising a child together, after whispering dreams into each other's skin during cold nights. But you don't. You never truly do. The truth is, marriage is less about love and more about blindfolded trust, and I wore mine like a fool. That morning started like any other, a half-eaten toast, a shared glance, a goodbye kiss at the door that now feels more like a decoy, a diversion while the trap quietly reset itself behind me. And the cruelest thing? There was no screaming, no slammed doors, no dramatic confession to cue me in. Just quiet, polite distance. That had been creeping in like fog. I mistook it for stress. I blamed work. I blamed parenthood. I blamed life. But I never blamed her because love, real love, makes you stupidly loyal to the wrong assumptions. Then I found the photo. Not a steamy message, not a misplaced text, not even a suspicious scent. Just a photo tucked deep in a hidden folder on her phone. One she probably thought I'd never find because we trusted each other, remember? That's the thing about trust. It's a gift with no refund policy. The photo was of them, him and her, in a hotel room that I instantly recognized. We'd stayed there once on our anniversary. She had brought him to a memory that belonged to us. That wasn't just betrayal, it was desecration. My stomach sank in ways no roller coaster could imitate. My hands shook. I didn't even feel anger at first, just a cold, paralyzing sense of confusion. I must have stared at that image for 20 minutes trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was photoshopped. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. That's how deep denial runs when your identity is interwoven with someone else's existence. When she came home, I didn't confront her. Immediately, I watched her. I studied her like a stranger. I saw the way she placed her keys in the bowl, how she hummed while washing her hands, the rhythm of her steps down the hallway. All those movements used to mean home. Now they meant war. I thought of our son, 5 years old, just starting to form real memories. What would his memories of us be? Would they carry the warmth of bedtime stories and pancakes, or the quiet bitterness of two adults pretending they were fine? Pretending is an art we mastered over the last year. We had sex on anniversaries, bought gifts for birthdays, smiled in photos. We even fooled ourselves. But betrayal isn't just about the act. It's about the erosion, the slow, silent death of intimacy. And suddenly, I realized it had been dying for a long time, and I had chosen not to hear its screams. That night, I sat across from her at the dinner table and couldn't take my eyes off her hands. The same hands that had once wiped our child's tears now, tainted by a touch that didn't belong to me. She spoke about her day, about the office, about some client whose name I didn't care to remember, and I just nodded, chewing bland rice and swallowing rage. I waited until the next night. I couldn't sleep. My mind was a haunted house, and every room screamed her name, his face, that hotel bed. At 2:37 a.m., I woke her. I didn't yell. I simply asked, "Who is he?" The look on her face wasn't guilt. It was exhaustion. That hit harder than any confession could. She didn't deny it. She didn't even cry. She whispered his name, and I realized he had been around, on the fringes of our life. A coworker, a friend, someone who had been in our home, at our parties. I had shaken this man's hand. He had held my child. The betrayal wasn't isolated. It was layered. It had roots. She said it just happened. As if cheating is an accident and not a series of deliberate steps. As if hotel bookings and late-night texts are acts of divine possession. She said she felt unseen, that I had pulled away. I asked if she ever told me that. She hadn't. Or maybe she did, and I missed it, buried under deadlines and bills and being a dad, and trying so damn hard to keep the world spinning for everyone but myself. But does that excuse it? Does feeling unseen give someone the right to erase vows, to tear the fabric of a family and blame it on emotional drought? We were all tired. I was tired, but I didn't stray. I didn't replace pain with someone else's body. That's when the anger came, not the explosive kind, but a slow burn. The kind that simmers under your skin, poisoning every memory. I looked at her and realized I didn't know who she was anymore. Maybe I never did. Maybe love had painted over the flaws so vividly that I forgot to look underneath. And yet, I still loved her. That was the most horrifying part. I still loved the woman who shattered me. Or maybe I just loved the ghost of who she used to be. I didn't know what to do. Separation? Counseling? Revenge? I thought of our child again, asleep down the hall. He had kissed her cheek. That evening, good night, Mommy. Would that kiss still mean the same tomorrow? Would I be strong enough not to weaponize my pain through him? Because that's what happens in broken homes. The kids carry shrapnel from wars they didn't start. I didn't want that. I wanted peace. But peace comes at a price, and I wasn't sure if I was willing to pay it just yet. The next morning, everything looked the same, and that was the cruelest part. Sunlight still filtered through the kitchen window like it always did. The kettle still whistled. Cartoons still played in the background while her son munched cereal. And yet I stood there, watching her pour coffee like she hadn't detonated a bomb in the heart of our home just hours earlier. She offered me a cup, as if caffeine could mask betrayal, as if pretending we were still us would somehow erase the image of her and him in that room where we once celebrated our love. I declined the coffee. I couldn't taste anything anyway. My senses were short-circuited, locked in a loop of remembering and re-remembering the lie I had unknowingly lived beside. That day, I went through the motions, dropped our son off at school, answered emails made. Small talk, but inside I was collapsing. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly like a building filled with rot finally giving in. I scrolled through old photos on my phone during lunch. Her smile haunted me, not because it wasn't real, but because I now knew it could exist alongside secrets. That's the thing. Cheating doesn't just destroy trust in one person. It corrodes your entire framework for understanding reality. If love can live beside lies, what else in life have I misunderstood? By evening, I was spiraling. I didn't know who to talk to. Friends? Too messy. Family? Too shameful. I didn't want sympathy or judgment. I wanted clarity, a reason, a sign, anything. I sat in my car long after getting home, watching the lights in our house flicker on. She was inside, maybe making dinner, maybe on the phone with him. I didn't know, and the not knowing was torture. I remembered how we used to greet each other at the door. That spark, that little dance of smiles. It had been gone for months, maybe years. I stepped inside eventually. Our son ran to hug me, grounding me, saving me. For myself, for a few precious seconds. I held him tighter than I probably should have. She watched. From the kitchen, said nothing. Her silence wasn't cold. It was resigned, as if she had already played this scene in her head 1,000 times and had no new lines left to deliver. After bedtime, we sat in the living room, not next to each other, two distant continents on the same planet, unable to bridge the emotional oceans between them. I asked her if it was still going on. She said no. She said it ended a month ago. I didn't know if that made it better or worse. She said she had wanted to tell me, that she was ashamed, that she had ended it because she realized what she stood to lose. I almost laughed. It wasn't funny. It was just absurd. You don't realize the value of what you have until you've burned it. I asked Wyam, why not leave me if she was that unhappy? She said she didn't want to break our family. The irony was suffocating. I asked how many times. She didn't answer. I didn't ask again. Some answers aren't worth the pain of hearing. I went to sleep on the couch that night, not because I was angry, but because I couldn't stand the smell of our bed, the smell of what was once sacred now contaminated by what ifs and maybe thence. I laid there staring at the ceiling, wondering if healing was even possible. People talk about forgiveness like it's a straight road, but it's a labyrinth. And I was still at the entrance, unsure if I even wanted to go in. Over the next week, we pretended. For our son, for the neighbors, for the world. We became actors in our own home, playing the role of husband and wife with mechanical precision. I hated it, but I also needed the time to think, to breathe, to feel without reacting. She started making small efforts, packing my lunch, folding my laundry, sending me texts like she used to, but it all felt too late, like putting flowers on a grave. I didn't know if it was guilt or love motivating her. Maybe both. And I didn't know if I could believe in either anymore. I started writing things down. Not poetry, not letters, just thoughts. Raw, ugly truths I couldn't say out loud. I needed to make sense of my pain. I needed to see it on paper to believe it was real, because part of me still hoped it was all a nightmare I could wake from. I remembered how we met. College. She wore a red scarf and talked about books like they were people. I love that. She challenged me. She made me laugh. She cried when I proposed. I cried too. I remembered the birth of our son, the way she gripped my hand, the way we both sobbed when he took his first breath. We were a team, a real one, and that's what made this so hard. Affairs don't just erase years. They bury them in doubt. Every memory becomes suspect. Every kiss is retroactively questioned. Was it real? Was she thinking of him? Was I ever enough? I stopped eating properly. My body didn't crave food. It craved answers, apologies, rewinds, none of which were coming. I started going for long walks at night, alone, through the empty streets. I needed the silence to scream into. I needed the cold air to numb what the pain couldn't. I'd pass houses with lit windows and wonder, how many of them held secrets too? How many couples were sitting 2 feet apart and feeling oceans between them? This is the part no one tells you about betrayal. It makes the world feel alien. You stop trusting people. You stop trusting your instincts. You even stop trusting your own emotions because you loved someone who betrayed you. And now you question whether your definition of love is just broken. And maybe it is. Maybe I am. But amidst all that, there was one thought that kept coming back. I deserved better. Not because I was perfect, not because I never made mistakes, but because I remained loyal in a world that rewards convenience over commitment. And loyalty deserves more than silence and hotel rooms with someone else. The confrontation was inevitable. After a week of silence, layered with tension thick enough to suffocate, I finally forced myself to face her fully. Not just the woman I thought I knew, but the stranger who had fractured my world. I sat her down in the living room, away from the distractions, away from the protective walls we'd both built. I wasn't sure if I wanted answers or just to hear the truth spoken aloud, because sometimes the silence of what's left unsaid is the loudest scream of all. She looked at me with tired eyes, the kind that carry regrets deeper than words can express. When I asked her to explain, to tell me what had happened, she hesitated, not because she wanted to lie, but because even she seemed lost in the labyrinth of her own choices. She told me it wasn't planned, that it was a moment of weakness, a phrase so common it felt like a script repeated by countless broken marriages. She spoke about loneliness, about feeling invisible, about the small cracks that widened into canyons between us. She said she never wanted to hurt me, that she loved me, but felt trapped in a life that no longer felt like hers. Her voice trembled as she described her guilt, her shame, her fear of losing me, of losing our son, of losing everything we built. She made excuses, yes, but buried beneath them was a desperate attempt to make sense of her own betrayal. I listened, fighting the urge to interrupt, to scream, to walk away. Her words felt like knives, but I needed to hear them, even if they tore me apart. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Maybe she knew it wasn't hers to ask for. Maybe she already assumed it was gone forever. The rawness of her confession shattered the last remnants of illusion. She wasn't the perfect wife I'd imagined. She was a flawed human, drowning in her own pain and mistakes. And I wasn't a perfect husband either. I had failed to see her struggling, failed to reach out when she needed me most. But failure didn't excuse betrayal. It complicated it, it deepened the wounds, but it didn't heal them. The emotional impact hit me like a storm. At first, there was shock, a physical, gut-wrenching disbelief that someone I loved could betray me so profoundly. Anger followed quickly, a fire that scorched every happy memory, every promise whispered in the dark. I wanted to scream, to punish, to erase her from my life entirely. But underneath the rage was a deep, aching sadness, a sorrow so profound. It felt like losing a part of myself. A more in the future we'd imagined, the dreams that now lay. Shattered. Nights turned into endless spirals of sleepless torment. I questioned everything: my worth, my masculinity, my ability to trust again. How do you rebuild when the foundation itself is cracked? Days blurred together in a haze of pain and confusion. Friends' well meaning words rang hollow. You'll get through this. Time heals all wounds. But time was a cruel trickster, stretching moments of agony into infinity. I felt isolated, trapped in a prison of my own heartbreak. Yet, amid the chaos, a small voice inside whispered that acceptance was the only way forward. Not the naive kind that pretends everything is fine, but a gritty, painful acceptance of reality as it was. This led me to a crossroads. Do I fight for what we had or let it go? The decision was agonizing. Part of me wanted to salvage our marriage, to seek counseling, to rebuild trust brick by fragile brick. Another part wanted to walk away, to protect my heart from further damage. I thought about our son, the innocent center of this storm, who deserves stability and love from both parents. I knew whatever path I chose would shape his future. In the end, I chose neither immediate reconciliation nor separation. Instead, I decided to pause, to take time for myself to heal, to understand what I needed before making irreversible decisions. I asked for space, for honesty, for commitment to transparency if we were to try again. I wanted to see if the woman I loved was willing to fight too, or if this was the end of our story. The journey wasn't easy. It required confronting uncomfortable truths, unlearning patterns, and confronting pain daily. Some days I felt hope flicker, others despair swallowed whole. But through it all, I learned profound lessons. I learned that love is complex and sometimes messy beyond recognition. That forgiveness isn't a gift you give to others, but a liberation you grant yourself. That trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, but only if both people are willing to lay down their defenses and be brutally honest. I also learned that sometimes love means letting go, not out of weakness, but out of respect for yourself and what you deserve. My advice to anyone walking this path is to never lose sight of your own worth. Betrayal cuts deep, but it does not define you. Seek truth, demand respect, and above all, be kind to yourself in the process. Healing isn't linear, and there is no shame in seeking help. The pain you feel now can become the foundation for a stronger, wiser version of yourself. And while the scars may never fully fade, they can serve as reminders of resilience, growth, and the unyielding human capacity to love again. After deciding to give ourselves a chance to heal, the reality of living in the same house with the woman who had betrayed me hit harder than I anticipated. It was like walking through a museum of memories where every corner whispered stories of what once was and what had been shattered. We didn't talk much, but the silence between us screamed louder than any argument. Every glance felt loaded. Was it guilt, shame, regret, or something else entirely? Our son remained the fragile thread connecting us, yet even his presence couldn't fill the emotional chasm. I found myself hyper-aware of her routines. Every step she took, try to read between the lines. Was she sincere in her efforts to rebuild, or just afraid of losing everything? The small gestures she'd made, leaving notes, cooking dinner, trying to rekindle the flame, felt like fragile seedlings fighting to grow in a wasteland. But I was too wounded to nurture them properly. Some nights, I catch her staring at me, eyes pleading for understanding, for forgiveness, for something I wasn't sure I could give. Our conversations were mechanical, rehearsed, stripped of warmth or spontaneity. We had lost the language of love, and no dictionary seemed to help us find it again. I started attending therapy alone, needing a safe space to untangle the knot of emotions inside me. The therapist challenged me to face uncomfortable truths, My own shortcomings, the dynamics we'd ignored, the ways I contributed to the distance between us. It wasn't about blame, but about understanding the whole picture. Slowly, I began to see that while betrayal was a deep wound, it was also a symptom of something broken on both sides. That realization didn't absolve her, but it gave me perspective. It gave me a chance to decide what kind of husband and man I wanted to be moving forward. Meanwhile, she started individual therapy too. It was a relief to see her take responsibility and confront her demons rather than bury them under excuses. But the process was painful for both of us. There were setbacks, tears, moments of doubt that made me question if this was even possible. I wrestled with jealousy and fear. What if it happened again? Could I ever fully trust her? And what about the man she had been involved with? Did she regret him? Was he just a shadow lurking in the corners of our life now? Those thoughts were poison, yet I couldn't stop drinking from that cup. Over time, I learned to catch myself, to breathe through the panic, to remind myself that healing isn't linear and that patience was essential. We started couples therapy cautiously, each session peeling back layers of resentment, hurt, and misunderstanding. We talked about what led us here, the unmet needs, the silent suffering, the communication breakdowns. We spoke about love languages, expectations, fears, and hopes. For the first time in a long time, there was honesty without judgment. We had to rebuild trust from scratch, a slow, deliberate process. It meant transparency, sharing passwords, checking in more often, being vulnerable in ways that terrified us both. I won't pretend it was easy. There were days when the past seemed to suffocate us, when memories of betrayal clouded every interaction. But there were also moments of genuine connection, small smiles, shared laughter, a touch that felt real. I discovered that forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to move forward despite the pain. I also learned that love isn't a static feeling, but an active choice, a commitment renewed every day. What surprised me most was how this ordeal forced me to grow. I became more empathetic, more patient, more aware of the complexities of human emotions. I stopped seeing her as an enemy and started seeing her as a flawed but real person fighting her own battles. Yet, despite progress, the question remained, was this enough? Could we truly heal, or were we just clinging to a broken dream? I knew the answer wasn't simple. It depended on many things, including time, effort, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. And sometimes, the bravest choice is to walk away with grace and dignity rather than cling to what no longer serves you. But for now, I chose hope. I chose to believe that people can change, that love can survive even the darkest storms if nurtured with honesty and care. I chose to fight for my family, not because I was naive, but because I was resilient. This experience taught me that relationships are not just about passion or romance. They're about trust, respect, and the willingness to face the hard work when things get ugly. They require forgiveness, communication, and sometimes the courage to start over. If you're facing betrayal, know that you're not alone. Your pain is valid. Your doubts are normal, but there's a way through, even if it feels impossible. Be kind to yourself. Seek help. Don't rush decisions. Healing takes time, and it's okay to take it one day at a time. And above all, remember that your worth is never defined by someone else's choices. You deserve love that is honest, loyal, and unwavering. As weeks turned into months, I realized that the ripples of betrayal extended far beyond just my marriage. They seeped into every part of my life, reshaping how I saw myself, how I interacted with others, even how I viewed the future. I found myself withdrawing from friends, avoiding social gatherings where questions or pity might lurk. The shame was a silent shadow, following me like a ghost no matter where I went. I began to question the very foundation of my identity. Was I still the man I used to be? The husband, the father, the friend? Or had that man died the moment trust shattered? Work became both a refuge and a torment. I buried myself in tasks to avoid confronting the storm inside my mind. But the distraction was temporary. Behind every spreadsheet, every email, the questions gnawed at me. How? Could she do this? What did I miss? Was I enough? My confidence eroded, replaced by an insidious self-doubt. Intimacy, once a source of joy and connection, now felt foreign and fraught with tension. The idea of being vulnerable again was terrifying. What if opening my heart only invited more pain? I fought with my own heart daily, battling between the desire to hold on and the urge to let go. Sleep was elusive, often interrupted by nightmares and memories that played like a cruel highlight reel. There was no map for this kind of pain, no instructions for how to navigate the landscape of betrayal. I sought solace in books, podcasts, and online forums, desperate to find someone who had walked this path and emerged whole. Their stories offered fragments of hope, but also warnings. Healing is messy, unpredictable, and doesn't always end in reconciliation. At home, the atmosphere remained tense, a fragile truce maintained by unspoken rules and cautious steps. Our son, innocent in this chaos, struggled in his own way. More clingy, quieter, sometimes angry without clear reason. It broke me. To see him suffer from wounds he didn't understand. I became more protective, more determined to shield him from the fallout. But the truth was unavoidable. Our family had changed, maybe forever. The betrayal had fractured the very trust and safety a family is supposed to provide. Yet, amid the despair, I also noticed moments of unexpected grace. Small acts of kindness from my wife, glimpses of the woman I once loved, reminded me that people are complicated, capable of both great hurt and deep remorse. She attended every therapy session, committed to making amends not just with words but with actions. I began to see her not just as the person who betrayed me, but as someone struggling with her own pain and regrets. This shift in perspective didn't erase the hurt, but softened the edges, allowing me to hold both anger and compassion simultaneously. It was a paradox I hadn't anticipated but needed desperately. One of the hardest lessons was learning to forgive, not to excuse the betrayal, but to release its power over me. Forgiveness was less about her and more about freeing myself from the chains of bitterness that threatened to consume me. It was a process that took time, tears, and a willingness to face the darkness head on. I realized forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or pretending nothing happened. It meant choosing to no longer be defined or controlled by the pain. This realization gave me strength to rebuild my life, piece by fragile piece. I reconnected with friends I had distanced myself from, allowing their support to anchor me. I found new outlets, running, writing, creative projects, that helped me reclaim a sense of identity beyond the trauma. I also started dating again, cautiously at first, scared of opening myself up, but knowing that healing included rediscovering joy and connection. Each step was a risk, each smile a victory. The journey was anything but linear. Some days, I felt like I was moving forward. Others, I slipped back into despair. But slowly, I began to see light where there had only been shadows. The experience reshaped my understanding of love and relationships profoundly. I learned that betrayal, while devastating, doesn't have to be the end of love. It can be a painful catalyst for growth, self-discovery, and transformation. If both people are willing to confront their flaws and commit to change. I also understood that sometimes the bravest thing is to walk away with dignity when healing together isn't possible. Holding on out of fear or habit is a different kind of pain. To those who have been betrayed, I say, your pain is real, your emotions valid. Don't rush your healing. Take the time you need to grieve, to rebuild, and to redefine what love means for you. Don't let anyone tell you that forgiveness is easy or that moving on means forgetting. It means finding peace on your own terms. Above all, remember that your worth is not diminished by another's betrayal. You are deserving of love that is faithful, honest, and nurturing. And sometimes, the most radical act of self-love is choosing yourself first before anyone else. This path isn't easy, but it is possible. And on the other side of pain, there is hope. In the quiet moments after the storm, when the house finally settled into a fragile calm, I was forced to confront a terrifying truth. My identity had been irrevocably altered. The man I once was, the confident, trusting husband, was gone, replaced by someone cautious, scarred, and uncertain. I realized that betrayal wasn't just a wound inflicted on the heart. It was an earthquake shaking the very ground beneath my feet, toppling everything I thought was stable. Suddenly, every interaction with my wife felt like walking on thin ice. I scrutinized her words and actions, looking for signs of honesty or deceit. Every excuse she offered felt rehearsed, and every moment of silence stretched into endless suspicion. The boundaries of our relationship blurred. Trust, once implicit, now had to be earned again with painstaking effort. I struggled with resentment and doubt, which often spiraled into self loathing. Was I to blame? Had I missed the warning signs? Was I not enough? These questions haunted me relentlessly, like an echo in a canyon with no end. But amid this chaos, I discovered an unexpected truth. I had to redefine what love and loyalty meant to me. It wasn't the fairy tale I once believed in, but a complex, sometimes brutal reality that demanded resilience and courage. I began to see that love wasn't just about passion or happiness. It was about commitment in the face of adversity, about choosing to be vulnerable despite the risk of pain. The hardest part was deciding whether to rebuild or to let go. Every day felt like walking a tightrope between hope and despair. I wanted to believe in a future where we could heal and grow stronger, but I also feared being hurt again, deeper and more destructively. The idea of separation loomed as a shadow, both terrifying and strangely liberating. I realized that whatever path I chose, it had to honor my own dignity and well being. Rebuilding trust required more than words. It demanded transparency, honesty, and real change. She had to confront her mistakes and their causes, not to excuse them, but to prevent repetition. I needed to confront my own vulnerabilities and fears, to open myself up to healing and growth. This was not a journey for the faint-hearted, but a battleground where two flawed people fought for a chance at redemption. As I navigated this emotional wilderness, I learned to lean on others, friends, family, and therapists who offered support without judgment. Their presence reminded me that I was not alone and that healing was possible even when hope felt distant. I also discovered the power of forgiveness, not as a one-time event, but as a daily choice to release anger and bitterness. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. It freed me to build a new future, whether together or apart. This experience reshaped my understanding of strength. True strength wasn't about suppressing pain or hiding vulnerability, but facing harsh truths with honesty and grace. It was about allowing myself to feel deeply and to seek help without shame. It was about choosing love, not as a feeling, but as a deliberate act of courage. Looking back, I see that betrayal shattered illusions, but also created space for profound growth. It forced me to question my assumptions, to reevaluate my values, and to become more compassionate to both myself and others. For anyone facing similar heartbreak, my advice is to give yourself permission to grieve fully, to feel every emotion without judgment. Healing is not a straight path, and it's okay to stumble. Seek support, communicate honestly, and don't be afraid to set boundaries. Remember that your worth is not defined by what others do to you, but by how you choose to respond. Whether you rebuild or walk away, do it on your terms, with strength, dignity, and hope for the future. Betrayal may have broken your heart, but it doesn't have to break your spirit. And sometimes, from the darkest moments, the strongest versions of ourselves emerge. When betrayal first tore through my life, it felt like a lightning strike that left me stunned and broken. The shock wasn't just about the act itself, but the shattering of everything I believed in. The shared dreams, the promises whispered in the dark, the quiet moments that once seemed unbreakable. I was forced to confront a raw, painful reality. Love is fragile, and trust can be shattered in an instant. But as the days passed, the initial pain gave way to a more complex emotional turmoil. Anger roared through me like a wildfire, consuming everything in its path. I wanted to lash out, to demand answers, to punish. Yet, deep down, I knew that rage was a mask for the vulnerability beneath. The fear of being abandoned, of not being enough, of facing a future alone. The confrontation with my wife was a moment suspended in time. Her eyes held a mixture of guilt, shame, and desperation. She stumbled through explanations that felt like thin veils over a deeper truth she struggled to voice. There were excuses, stress, loneliness, mistakes, but none could erase the betrayal's sting. Her words felt both like a plea for forgiveness and a confession of failure. I listened, torn between the desire to believe and the crushing weight of doubt. That confrontation wasn't just about uncovering what happened. It was about facing the fracture in our foundation and deciding if it was reparable. The emotional journey that followed was a labyrinth of pain, confusion, and tentative hope. I oscillated between moments of bitterness and flashes of empathy. There were nights when I cried for the life we lost, the future that slipped through our fingers, and for the woman I loved who had broken my heart. I wrestled with the paradox of wanting to hate her, but still feeling a deep connection that refused to sever. Acceptance didn't come quickly. It was a slow, reluctant process marked by setbacks and breakthroughs. I had to forgive not only her, but also myself for the mistakes, the blindness, and the failures to communicate. This journey transformed me, forcing me to confront my own flaws and vulnerabilities. In deciding how to move forward, I weighed the fragments of our past against the possibility of a renewed future. Separation seemed like an escape, a way to protect myself from further pain. Yet, the thought of dismantling our family, of losing the life we built, was unbearable. I chose to fight, not out of stubbornness, but from a deep desire to reclaim what was worth saving. Working on the marriage meant rebuilding trust brick by brick, with honesty as the mortar. It meant facing uncomfortable truths, committing to change, and embracing vulnerability. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was ours to walk together. Reflecting on this painful chapter, I learned that betrayal is not the end of love, but a call to its deepest resilience. It taught me that forgiveness is an act of strength, not weakness, and that healing requires courage, patience, and compassion. To anyone caught in the storm of infidelity, I offer this. Your pain is real, your feelings valid, and your path unique. Choose healing in whatever form it takes. Honor your truth, and know that even broken hearts can find a way to beat strong again.